Hello and welcome to my retro watches, and yes, it's another microscope video or a microscope review. However, I think this is going to benefit us all. So I get asked a lot about microscopes. I always also say that a microscope is a game changer in this hobby. If you're going to progress through the hobby, at some point in time you're going to want to invest in either a stereoscope like this AM scope or perhaps a digital microscope like this Anden Star. Both are good in their own merits. Personally, I prefer a stereoscope for certain jobs. However, I've done a lot of videos that you've seen, very close-up things on this particular microscope. Plus, of course, I did a full video review. So microscopes are really important in our hobby, and it really does help you actually even just see how well you've cleaned parts. For instance, I remember buying this one and realizing that my cleaning method was absolutely awful, because what I thought was good when you looked at it through a microscope was anything but. So there is a limitation, certainly to the Anden Star and this particular AM scope, and that is that you can't really work under them. It is a question that I get asked time and time again by either you guys or people in the Facebook group. Can I work under these microscopes? And the answer is no, you can't. Not really. Here's a typical screwdriver. This is at its height, its maximum height. I mean, there is some way to fudge it to get a little bit higher actually, plus somebody 3D printed this stand, one of my subscribers, thank you very much, which you can bolt at the back here, and you can get this to a height where you can work at it. But it is a bit of a fiddle, it is a bit of a faff. So I've generally said, no, you can't work under a microscope, which is a limitation. However, in this box here, this has been sent to me by a company called LINKMICRO. Just for transparency, I do believe I get to keep this microscope. However, it will be a very honest review because I'm not going to bullshit. If this is no good for a hobby, I'm going to be telling you the price for this, I think, is somewhere near $300. So it is quite an investment. But what this has got to offer compared to everything else, I've been offered lots of microscopes actually over the years, but this one is slightly different. It's got a bigger sensor. It's got a bigger screen, but where it comes in is this post, if you like. So the adjusting pole at the back is 13 inches high, and also on this axis we can move it along this axis too. It's got kind of like a boom arm as well. So I'm going to set the microscope up and I'm going to use it. I'm going to use it for the next week or two on various projects that I've got going on. I might even film it for some of the videos I've got coming up as well. Get a good feel for it, come back. So you'll see this in just a few seconds, of course, and I'll give you the honest feedback. We'll go through all the features, whether it's any good, certainly if it's any good for this hobby, what are the plus and what are the minuses. So stay tuned. Hopefully this is going to be an interesting ride, and I'll see you in just a second. Okay, microscope is all set up. Now this thing I've used now for a little while. It's absolutely rammed with features, most of it non-applicable for us. But I told you there was something really interesting about it, and that is the size of the working area underneath for our hobby of watchmaking. Now this thing does come with 3 different lenses. One of them is like proper cellular close lens that's no good for us. The one I've got on here at the moment, it says object distance 12mm to 320mm. So it's basically a lens that you can have quite high up and see quite close in. Now I'm going to do some sort of swapping over the screen so you can see that at the moment we're at pretty much the highest setting that this thing will go. I've got a rule, and if I offer that rule up, we are looking at around about 8.5 inches, so that's about 22-ish centimeters, something like that. So that is loads and loads of working distance. Here is a typical screwdriver, and that's where I can get in. By comparison, hopefully these are in shot just about. So my AM scope, which is still my go-to scope, this is the highest it'll go to. So I've never been able to do anything with a screwdriver under there. Granted, I can do things with tweezers, but it's not great for building watches, purely just for inspection. And then the Anden Star that I reviewed about a year ago, which I use a lot actually for my videos, for some close-up like oiling work and stuff. Again, that's great, but that's pretty much as high as it goes, which is quite small. There is ways to jack this up a little bit higher, by the way, and of course there's this 3D printed stand that you can have to get it up higher. But this one is leaps and bounds. I mean, just look at it. It's huge. The screen's huge. Plenty of light. So I've been impressed so far. The build quality itself, well, you know, it's cheap aluminium casting. This is all plastic, so it's not the greatest of build quality, but I think it probably redeems itself a little bit in the features. So the plan is to basically disassemble a watch and then possibly assemble it again afterwards. If I can do that on this, then I'll be pleased, for one, and then I could possibly recommend it, because it gets asked all the time, can you work under a microscope? I want to work under a microscope. Normally I say no, it's not a good idea. I like peripheral vision, so if I'm working on something and it flies away, at least I've got some idea. If I'm looking down the barrel of a stereoscope, I've got no idea where it's gone, whereas on this potentially I have. Certainly, again, for people like myself who's got eyesight that isn't the greatest anymore, then perhaps using a screen is going to be a good idea. I've got to get used to kind of looking here like this and doing this, whereas I've always done this with my eye really close to the movement, as probably a lot of you guys have. So that is kind of a whole new world of watchmaking for me. But then it's not dissimilar to when I've got my camera here and I'm filming videos for you guys, because, you know, when you're like this and you're used to working, when I'm filming, I am basically almost sitting back here and trying to do it. So it is a lot different, I have to say. I will now cut to this screen so you can see clearly. This is the highest adjustment we've got, really. And I could disassemble that watch in that view, absolutely no problem at all. We have got some small adjustment here that I can bring down, just try and keep it in focus, or try and get some of it in focus for you. There we go. So I've come down nothing. In reality, I've come down to like 7.5 inches. So there's a little bit of extra travel. And then of course I can undo the back and move the whole thing down the post. So if I moved it to somewhere like here, bring that in focus. I mean, look at that. That's probably too close for a disassemble of a watch movement. And if I need to get there with my eyes, again, I'm going to start headbutting this. But for inspection work or oiling again, that's pretty decent. And you can see I've still got room to go. I don't think I'm going to need it. So I'm going to crack this back up, get set up, and then we'll disassemble the movement. I'll probably do it in like a fast forward thing, because it's going to take me 10-15 minutes. I've got a Seiko, it would be a Seiko, wouldn't it? But one of my own, it's a 6106. It needs a service. I've never taken it apart yet. So it'll be interesting to take it apart, examine it. You get to see what the microscope is capable of. So I'll just get that set up and then we'll cut to that. Okay, so I'm all set. I'm pretty much almost at the highest spot. That is adequate for me for what I need. So let's disassemble the movement and see how we get on. So there's the dial side. I found that remarkably easy. I mean, okay, it is a movement, I know, off the back of my hand, but it's a bit of a joy. I'm not having to use my loop, which I've just bought this new one. This was like £30, but I've not needed it particularly. Yeah, it's easier on my back. I mean, there's a lot of positives so far, but we're pretty early days. So let's flip it over. Let's disassemble the other side. Okay, movement's flipped over. Obviously, I am recording everything on this. I just thought I'd say there's lots of different resolution options, including 4K, but I've recorded in 4K, and I don't think it is 4K. I think it's just upscaled 1080p, to be honest with you. There is some 60 frames per second stuff. There's even 120 frames per second if you wanted to slow stuff down. I'm just doing 1080p, 30 frames a second, and getting good enough results. Whether I could make a video just on this, I'm not sure. With the big camera that I use with the big lens, I've got a Canon f 2.8 100mm. So with that, you get a big image or a close-up image from far away, but I can really crop that image down to tiny parts. So when you're watching my videos, I've cropped a big screen into a tiny screen, if you like, and they keep the resolution. Whereas if you crop this, it's not as nice. It gets a bit pixelated. However, let's just crack on. Let's just take this side of the movement apart and see if it's just as easy as it was on the other side. I think it's going to be. Well, that was remarkably easy. That was, I had a timer going, so that's 6.5 minutes to disassemble that side. About 7 minutes the other side as well. So say 13-14 minutes to disassemble the whole movement. Yeah, at the moment I'm quite speechless, really. It's quite interesting. Certainly different to everything different to what I'm used to, but I'm liking it. I'm liking it. That's the main thing. So I think what we'll do now is I'm going to bring the microscope head down quite a bit, and we'll do a little bit of inspection. Let's see how good or how close up. I've noticed that round where the barrel arbor is especially, it looks like a lot of gunk. So let's get up close and personal and do a bit of inspection. Well, we're now going to have a look at the main plate in some more detail, see how close we can get with the magnification on this microscope. And I am actually 24 hours on from the bit you've just watched, because I then did this bit, recorded it all, and then found out that the file was corrupt. And I was blaming the microscope. I was going crazy thinking, nah, this thing, obviously it's going to let me down. And in part, it is a problem with the microscope, but it's probably still a problem with me. So if you're watching this and you wanting to be filming your watch repairs, or by the way, you can take still images on this. I should actually mention that now, shouldn't I? Because it's a really good point. Taking still images. So the one thing I preach, and everybody does really, if you're getting into this hobby, take loads and loads of photographs, certainly of where the parts were when you were about to take them off, for instance, and that way you've got a reverse record that you can follow to rebuild the watch. So if you've got a camera like this, then I can take still photos with a click of a button on the remote control, and equally I can record video as well. What I found though when recording video is that I have to press the OK button on here to stop it, and if I don't stop it, or if I press the OK and it hasn't stopped, which is what happened last night, I then switched off the device, took out the little micro SD card, put it on my laptop, and the file was corrupt. And I've tested it because I was thinking, well, is it that? And yes. So if you leave it recording and you don't stop the record, then I guess it doesn't end the file as you would anticipate. So a bit stupid of me really, but there we go, there's a little fault. So back to the job in hand. I've got my rule back. You can possibly see, well maybe you can't, we're not very far away from the main plate. I would estimate, well I'd estimate probably only about an inch or so. So now you'll see what is on the screen, and we are looking at the center jewel there itself, the black background. So this is an annoyance for me, probably for this hobby. So these microscopes are designed for electronics, really doing soldering on circuit boards and such like. So what I found and what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to paint mine white. If I just remove that, put a bit of white paper underneath, it kind of transforms where we were. Just need to just adjust the focus again. There, so we're back in focus. So certainly when you want to look at jewels like this, you see the white is reflecting back at you. I can see with that one, that orangey sort of gloop that you can see is, well that's dried oil from the other side of the main plate. That's actually going to be some sort of die shock jewel. So yeah, back to here. So there we go, that is the center jewel, and you can see all the dried oil there quite easily. What is really interesting on here is this. Now in the other bit of the video I did scratch a bit this way, so it's now not looking as good. What we are seeing is dried oil. So that's dried oil that's sort of turning into a paste. It will eventually turn into a powder, and that powder will then make basically an oil, potentially turn into an abrasive and start wearing away. And Seikos especially are very well known for their barrel bearing wear. The barrel starts to wobble ever so slightly. These holes here get sort of oval shape because they're not jeweled, and this sort of debris will obviously be a contributory factor to that sort of problem. So I'm in this watch in the nick of time really. You know, it was running, however that will be very detrimental going forward, so I'll be able to clean all that off. So I'm still wanting to talk about the power in this. So we are still on this distance lens. I will put some more lenses on probably in a little while. However, this has got a remote control, and in the remote control, as much as I can change the brightness, you can see it going up now and going back down. So I can do all of that. There's loads of features, like, you know, to mess around with contrast and things like that. We've got a digital zoom, and it's a digital zoom times 3. So I'm going to max out the digital zoom now on this bit of grime. And we're getting close now, so you can see it starts to pixelate, or starts to get a bit noisy. So not ideal for film, but for examination. Well, look, you know, there we go. We're looking at this at some detail now, aren't we? That's absolutely superb. If we try and nip over, I've got to find it. Trying to remember where the jewels are now. Yeah, here's the center jewel. See, so we can see a lot clearer there. That dried oil as well. So microscopes are an absolute game changer for this hobby. I remember buying my AM scope and thinking, wow, that's a lot of money to spend. I spent £100 and something on that particular microscope, but it opened up my eyes to oiling, getting the oiling right, but things like this, inspecting the parts before you clean them, and then inspecting the parts when you've cleaned them, because once you've cleaned them, you then find out how good or bad your cleaning method is. So a microscope will change, revolutionize everything. Now I will try to confirm the price on this one a little bit later in the video, because I'm not prepared for it. I'm just ad-libbing the whole thing. It is in and around, I'm going to face the camera for this, it's in and around $300 US, which is, well, it is a lot of money, isn't it? Let's face it. So you've got to be some way into the hobby to want to buy this. We'll remain optimistic about whether it's worth that money. So far I'm thinking it's bloody decent for what I'm seeing. This big screen, the ability to do what I want to do. There's a great feature coming up that I'm going to try and show you, which is you can attach this to the computer. There is an app on your PC that you can then use to measure things. And I want to, for instance, look at this center jewel that we've got. I want to be able to try and measure the outer and inner diameter of that, which could be really useful for sizing jewels and such like further down the line if you ever got that detailed into this hobby. So for now, there you go. That's sort of how close we can get with it. I still think it's great. These little lights on the side here are doing their job really well. I'm going to clean the parts, and I am going to rebuild the movement on camera just using this alone and see how good or bad I can do that. So stay tuned for that. That'll be next for you. That'll be probably tomorrow for me once I've washed all the parts and got it all ready for filming. Right, time to show you the app. So I've connected the microscope to my laptop, downloaded the software. Now this software is, well, it's all right. I've only had a little bit of a play with it. It can be a bit finicky, but it's there really to measure things from what I can see up the top here. You can record and you can take some photographs, but as you can probably see from the picture, it's not the greatest on the screen here. Now what I'm going to try and do is measure some parts of watches so we get an idea of how we could possibly use this in our hobby. Figured like we could measure some jewel holes and things like that. So to start with, we have to calibrate, and it tells you to put a rule on. So I've got a 6-inch engineer's rule. It says here every increment basically is half a millimeter. So what I need to do first of all is calibrate my distance. Now I have been testing a little bit, so I know what I've got to do. I'm going to just call this Seiko 1. And we're going to say that it's going to be 1 millimeter that we're taking. I go up to here, take this line measure tool, pick a point. Now I'm not using a mouse because I'm at my workbench. So I'm going to draw a straight line to the beginning, or what I perceive is the beginning of the second line. Now I've got to take it into license. Don't know how accurate the rule is, and it's all going to be dependent on where I'm clicking on the screen. So I don't know. So I'm going to say there is a 1 millimeter. Okay. Double click on the screen. I know it's saying something different. We're going to go down here and press calibrate and finish. So that's now said that that line that we've just drawn is 1 millimeter, and we can try and test that theory as best we can. So if I clear that line, try and draw another line. Let's pick a different place. So let's pick somewhere like here. Again, go across to there. Well, I'm almost a thou out, aren't I? So that's 1 millimeter, 1 and 20 microns. So there we go. Incidentally, I'll just go back to the calibration. For anyone watching in America, units, we've got millimeters, we've got centimeters, and a few others, but it doesn't look like there's any imperial measurement system built into this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there you go. So I'm going to test it on the main plate that we just cleaned. I'm going to bring it over here, and there. Here is the center jewel. Just going to clear that off the screen first of all. So for the center jewel, the center wheel goes through there. I've put on my micrometer, I'll put a photo up now, the center wheel. It's not really a pivot, well, it is a pivot I suppose, like the tube. So I've measured that on my micrometer, and I get 0.78 millimeters, which if I round it up is about 31,000th of an inch. So I'm going to try and measure that hole just by eye really to see. It should be slightly smaller, shouldn't it? So we're going to go first of all for the straight line tool, and it's all going to be dependent on where you think the start of the jewel is, which is a little bit ambiguous on this possibly. So I'm going to line it up. I think it's, I don't know whether that's reflection or what that is. And it would help as well if I'd selected the tool first. I'm going to go from there to there. I don't want to be too pedantic. And then if I go back to measure, it tells me that that measurement there is 0.81 millimeters, which is slightly bigger than what we're getting on the center wheel, which is true. The center wheel should be smaller than the jewel. We don't want the jewel pinching the center jewel. Friction is the worst enemy in a movement, really. It's going to slow things down. So how accurate that is, I don't know, but it's encouraging because it's telling us that that measurement is slightly bigger. So if you were trying to replace that jewel and you didn't know the diameter, at least you've got some idea. And I think that's my point really with this, is that you could use this, like say, measuring a hole here. We could perhaps, just for argument's sake, we have the barrel bearing, I suppose. So that's where all that gunk and dirt was, so it's been cleaned off. It doesn't look it, of course. That's what you're left with on the main plate, is all that sort of scarring. And once again, for this I took a photo. So on the micrometer it's 0.88 millimeters, slightly rounded up is 39 thousandth of an inch. So let's see what we can do with this one. We're going to first of all use the straight measure tool. So if I just sort of line it up there, go across to here, so we're getting 1 millimeter and 3 microns. So that's, again, that's fairly consistent, isn't it? That hole should be bigger. With it being a Seiko and with it not jeweled, that hole's probably slightly bigger than it should be. It's probably not also so round. But there you go, you know, that's a 1 millimeter hole we can sort of conclude from that, or thereabouts. Another way to measure it that I've found, although it really is difficult to do, there is a diameter tool, which is this one. The thing with the diameter tool is you've got to know, if you put a crosshair there, where to start it. And I don't. You do have a crosshair function, but I'll put it on the screen for you. It puts the crosshair wherever you want. So I can click on the screen and say, well, yeah, there's the center line, but I don't really know whether that is, and that's the problem. So I'll just clear those off, select this tool, oops, and what this does, it sort of grows a circle for you that you can move around it. So you can move around on that axis. So we can fill the hole there where we think. Double click, and over here it's giving us, well, there we go. So it's 1.013 millimeters. It's giving us the girth and the area. It's quite cool how it calculates that. So there's another useful tool. Is this appropriate for watchmaking? Well, you tell me. You tell me what you could use it for. A lot of you guys are better than I am as well. You might watch the video. You might think this is just completely waste of time. You don't need to know this information. Or you might want to be pretty analytical and like to measure stuff. And it's quite cool at the same time. It's a feature of this microscope that I didn't expect would be on it. So there we go, that's that app. Let's cut now and I'll show you the different lenses and what they do, and then hopefully we can rebuild that movement. Like I keep saying, this microscope comes with 3 lenses, so I've put the least useful one for us in this hobby, but it's just something to show your kids or to mess around with. This is an object distance of 4mm to 5mm, so it's like ultra close. Have to have this little block here, which has got a light in it, so it shines the light up, and you can put microscope slides in there. Now it comes with a few slides, and the one I've got on at the moment is the most picturesque, if you like, so I'll put it on the screen for you now. This, it says, is a pine stem, so ignore the big crack in it. I managed to wind down too much and touch the slide and crack it, but you kind of get that. You can see at cellular level if you so choose. So it's good fun, good for the kids, or good if you want to look at anything really close up. So we'll move swiftly on to the main lenses that you'd be using in this microscope. Right, this is the next lens, and the lens I think we'll be using the most. It's the one that's the most adaptable for me, at least. This is an object distance of 12mm to 320mm, so we are pretty much at the top of the pole right now, and that is the picture we get on the screen, so we can see the whole main plate, no problem at all. Equally, we can bring this down, which I'm going to try and do. It's a bit clunky how it comes down, unfortunately. So I've come down to maybe 1.5 inches, 50mm, something like that. And look, we can zoom in and get that focused at that point. Absolutely no problems at all. So very, very versatile. Obviously we're now losing the area in which we can work in, but we have a solution for that, and that is lens number 3. So I'm going to just crank this one right back up to the top, because that's a good test bed for it, and I'll change the lens. Now changing the lens is very easy. Got 2 little screws here. They just pop out. They don't feel like they're built of anything other than plastic, but at least you've got some brass bushings or some copper bushings for the threads, so you won't lose the threads in a hurry. Okay, so that one's now attached. This is object distance 90mm to 300, so obviously that's giving you, we can come down 90mm or 90mm away from the object and still be in focus, which is kind of where we need to be. So if I cut to the screen and bring this in, so what you get with this lens is, apart from the whole thing keeps wobbling, is we are again quite a long way away, but we are a lot closer on magnification, a hell of a lot closer. In fact, I don't think this is a workable distance other than some fine work like placing the pallet fork or something like that. Generally you'd want to see as much of the main plate as you can just for putting screws in, but it gives you that area in which to work in. So I think this lens has got its uses. The downside to it is I don't think it lets as much light in. This picture you can see is a little bit misty. I have to move the little light stalks everywhere to try and get the best sort of contrast. Now I've got it like that. It's a little bit out of focus. So you are meddling with it a little bit. So certainly if you wanted to film like I do, I don't know how clear it's going to be in filming. I'm actually recording this bit in 4K, so I'd be quite interested. I don't believe for 1 minute it is 4K. So there we go. That is the 3 lenses and their uses. I'll just actually take this down to here. I don't know what distance this is. Try and get that in focus. Again, we're looking at that center jewel. So there's the center jewel. Let's get a screwdriver. Let's get that one. So I can probably just, if I took it up a little bit, I could get that under there and still work. But I mean, would you really want to be using a screwdriver in a screw, a big screwdriver like this at this magnification? I think not. But there we go. That's kind of the range that we've got with the lenses we've got, and that's, to me, is the selling point in this hobby. We've got all this versatility, which I haven't got with the AM scope, and I certainly haven't got it with the Anden Star either. So yeah, let's now do the main thing, the bit I'm looking forward to really, which is setting up and just rebuilding that movement just purely using this. And I'll do the oiling and everything on the microscope, see how effective that is, and also how good quality the imagery is. Okay, it's another day for me, but I'm now ready and very excited for the build of this watch, just to see if I can do it all on the microscope. I've got the loop just in case. My plan is to do as much as possible just staring at that screen to save my back some pressure. Hopefully it's going to save a bit of my eyesight. Hopefully it comes across on video very good too. So There are some what we call die fix jewels on this Seiko and some die shocks which are for the balance. I've pre-done those on the main plate and the train bridge, and I recorded them all on here, so as and when I'll ad hoc some of those in and probably narrate over the top, because those die fix jewels, if anyone's worked on Seikos, are particularly difficult, but I mastered them on here absolutely no problem. So let's crack on and do the main bit now. sticking a balance is, no, I can't do it very easily. I'll try again. Hey, that was not the easiest of balance placements, but the watch is running. That's the main thing. Now it's time for the motion works and the calendar works. Well, that is building a movement under a microscope. I found that generally really interesting, a little bit weird in places because I'm still trying to look at the screen and not the movement. Certainly screws, I think screws, all right to undo them, but to put them on you've got to really get down close with your loop to ensure that, one, you don't slip, and two, you're in the right place. So screws are a problem. What else? I can't really think of too much that I stumbled on particularly. It just feels a little bit alien, but I think getting used to that, this way of watchmaking or hobbyist watchmaking isn't a bad thing. I'm going to test this out. I think the next video I'm going to do, I've got a quick video to do on another Seiko, I know. I'm going to use this camera for that, just to sort of get some more practice with it, because I found it quite interesting. So, I mean, let's try and round up this video because it's probably already quite long. First of all, I hope you've enjoyed the full demonstration I'm giving this, and now really my honest thoughts on it. So, bugbears. There's a couple of bugbears. One main one, the main shaft or whatever you call it at the back here. So we've got all this height adjustment, which is the main selling point, I think, of this microscope for us guys. But you have to undo a little sort of nut, for want of a better word. We've got to slide this up and down. It sounds horrible. All I need to do on that is put a simple flipping rack and pinion on the back of it, so you can just wind it up and down to your heart's content. You've got, I never know how much you guys can see really. So we have this sort of minor adjustment here, which I have been using in places. As long as you remember, for instance, if you wind it to the top, when you're lowering down, you've got that extra little couple of inches of movement. So that's handy. And of course, what's that working on? A rack and pinion. So just put another one at the back here. That would solve a lot of problems really. Equally, you know, you've got the boom arm thing. That's pretty decent. I haven't actually found a use for that yet, but I'm kind of thinking just out loud now really that I can probably move that out there. If I can angle this all the way back or something, then there's a potential for trying to look in at a slightly different angle perhaps. So yeah, that is, because I know, or I'm hoping that LINKMICRO are watching, so that is a real big downfall, and let's try and solve that problem. I'm sure you can do it. Just the general overall build quality, it is, you know, plastic fantastic. This aluminium casting is not superb either. I think it will last, to be honest with you, because it's a fairly static thing, so you're not going to like chuck it around or anything going to break necessarily. Is it worth the nearly $300 that they're asking for it on Amazon? Well, that is a hard one for me to say. I think with everything at your review, realistically, I think it needs to be cheaper. Certainly, if you're coming into this hobby, it's always overwhelming. Absolutely every tool is really, really expensive. A microscope, I think, is a game changer anyway, but it's one of those things that you sort of work towards. So you get into the hobby, have a few watches that you fix and you get excited about, and as you progress, you start buying more and more kit, and then eventually you come into your own mind of thinking, I can justify the cost of a microscope because I'm much further down the rabbit hole of watchmaking anyway. So then you're going to be looking at things like the Anden Star, or even my AM scope here, which are around the £100 or $100 mark, something like that. Which you're still going to say, well, that's a lot of money. So this is another complete next level. I reckon if this was sort of $200, something like that, that would be a pretty sweet spot. I think it would sway a few more people who may have watched this video or are into this hobby to have a go at something like this. Granted, you could buy the Anden Star and try and make it sit higher and have all this, but then you can't do the stuff with the laptop, which I thought was quite cool to have that sort of recording function. The way this can take photographs and video is really interesting as well, because then you can build up that record for your watchmaking. So everything you're taking off, you can just literally use this remote control. Just you click one button, it'll take a photo as you're recording as well. So that's really, really handy. And a feature that I might use again in future videos, because a lot of the videos I do, if they're not a Seiko, then generally I've never been in that movement before, and I love that because I love filming to you guys stuff that I've never done out the box. It's like crazy really that you'd want to do something like that when you don't know what's under the next main plate or whatever. And often when I do those videos, I might do the disassembly, clean the movement. It might take me 2 or 3 weeks, sometimes even longer, before I get back to do the assembly. And then when I come back to the assembly, I'm thinking I can't remember where the parts have gone. So I have to sort of watch my video or edit the first part of my video to sort of refresh myself onto the movement before I can then have the confidence to sit down on an evening and go, right, I'm going to film the assembly. So obviously when I'm not filming, I'm just working on my own watches for pleasure, my mobile phone's out all the time and I'm just clicking away at the photographs. So this, again, from my point, is still a really, really good thing that I want to try and get into a habit of trying to use a little bit more, certainly for disassemblies, perhaps, where I can just go click, 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 and take photos while I'm recording videos for you. So it's a win for me. So yeah, you know, price, I think if the price was a bit lower, more of you might go for this. I think the features sell themselves, don't they? This absolute loads of room that you can do anything you want underneath that, absolutely no problem. The app was pretty cool. How accurate it was, I still don't know. There's other features on here as well. We can change it from colour to negative. I don't know what you'd use that for. I guess perhaps on circuit boards or something that makes it seem a bit clearer. This is predominantly for soldering and such like. These little antenna type lights, well, they're very good. However, you've got to get them positioned just right. I found that sort of low down here is not casting any shadows. Sometimes if you come in the top, there's a lot of shadowing going on. Certainly for recording purpose, that is more. So, but when you've got them down here, like I've just been rebuilding this movement, I'm bashing into them all the time, which is a bit of a nuisance. Now, I don't think that's a fault of And & Star's design. You could, in theory, have a ring light at the top here. But then that would have to be integrated into changing all the lenses and stuff, so that'd be a bit of a faff, I think. So these are still pretty useful, but you've just got to find that nice sweet spot of where to put them. So yeah, the base, again, a negative for me personally. The base should be white. It's certainly better for seeing the jewels and such like. But that's not something I think not And & Star, whoever they are, LINKMICRO are going to change. But personally, I will respray that. I don't know if I've got anything else to say. I've said loads of stuff, haven't I? Thank you first of all to LINKMICRO. I'm really pleased that I believe I get to keep this, which is overwhelmingly fantastic, because it's going to be a real winner. It's going to be in the videos a lot. I can just foresee that. So thank you to them. Thank you to all of you for watching this. I hope you don't just see it as a review. It is a bit of a learning curve, and hopefully you've all enjoyed watching the movement be taken apart and assembled. The assembly of that movement, because I will have speeded it up in the edit, I mean, I've only just done it, took around about an hour, I think, to fully assemble the movement. Now obviously I've still got to put the dial on and the hands, and I think I'll finish the video with a shot of the watch finished on the time grapher, so then at least you get to see just how good it's running at the end of it. Incidentally, what I did actually like as well is often, certainly when I'm filming again, you guys always in the comments, oh, there was a bit of dust that went under this wheel and there was a hair that went under that wheel. And that's usually because I've got all these other cameras trying to get in. I can't always see everything, and certainly the loop you don't see everything. Here is great, because the whole time I'm filming there were certain times where I could see a hair on the screen, and it was very easy to just take that out. And obviously cleanliness is the most important part of this hobby. One stray little hair in there, and a couple of weeks later this thing might stop, and then you're there taking it to bits again, hoping for the best. So yeah, that's it. I'm not going to say any more. Thanks to LINKMICRO. Thanks you all for watching. Leave your comments below. I'm going to read every single one. I'll be dying to hear what you're going to say about this this microscope. I'll reply to as many as I can. Stay tuned. I'm going to do another quick video, probably using this, as I said. I've got another watch with a story, and if that's successful, then it's on to the little Omega that I've got, that I posted on the social media forums and stuff as to which one we were going to do next. So it is then going to be the Omega. So stay tuned for that. That's all you're going to see. Not recently, going forwards now. Lots of watch repairs videos and restoration videos that I've got planned rather than reviews. Okay, thank you. I'm out of breath. See you soon. Bye for now.